there is going to be a new world out there. I have today Trent McLean, Stefano Aldigari, Ilsa Metchek, Marta Miller, Jeff Streeter.
Tukatalks is the show where fashion industry experts share real-world knowledge gained through hands-on experience.
Without a good pattern maker, you can't be a good designer.
Period.
And people say, oh, I'm the greenest, I'm the most sustainable, but it's not really true.
Tukatalks features candid conversations between apparel professionals, hosted by Ram Sareen, the founder of Tukatech.
You have the talent to design and develop and produce the products.
There's art and science, and our industry has been largely run by art, and that's a good thing.
Watch full episodes and clips at tukatech.com/Tukatalks or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to the Tukatalks YouTube channel and follow Tukatalks on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Let's work differently. Good morning from Los Angeles. Good evening from UK. Late evening from Pakistan and from Thailand. This is the first time ever we are going live in Tukatalks. And I'm very happy to have one of the leaders in the industry, David Birnbaum. Only if we could get a fraction of his experience, we will end up making less mistakes. And the young people who can guide us, Emma Birnbaum and Mohammed Erkan. I want to talk about today the subject, what do customers want? So now who is this customer? Are you my customer? Am I your customer? Am I the retailer? Am I the manufacturer? There are so many of us have so many questions. We don't know. We don't know which way the wind will blow, but we know one thing, that the velocity of the wind is shifting things in faster and sometimes in a damaging force. I'm sure technology has created a new working environment. 40% to 45% of the people in the United States are now working from home. But that doesn't mean that applies to everybody. Countries like Bangladesh and India and Pakistan or Vietnam and Cambodia, less than 15% of those people have the ability or opportunity to work from home. Yes, we have to look at all of them. Historically, we have seen 50 years is a period when a new revolution starts. Every 50, 60 years. The last one was in the 70s with the automation in the manufacturing. For the last 50 years, we've been working really with the same business model. We just moved our factories. So even if I go 50 years later to the factories offshore, it's working the same way. Well, we expanded, maybe making same category, larger quantity, made the factories bigger, but that did not change anything. The change is now on its way and is needed by the consumer. It's needed by the supply chain. The supply chains are so staggered that by the time everybody gets everything together and it comes to the consumer level, it's already too late. The people who were starting the trends, yes, they were expensive, but then they were passing on the trend to the second tier and the third tier and the fourth tier of the retailers who now trying to get volume and trying to get best possible delivery dates. But those dates are 9 months to a year after the first trend was shown by the trend makers. We've seen that too often. So yes, I got that much cheaper. Yes, I got a huge quantity, and so was the risk because I got that at the downward curve. of the fashion. This industry is more in the classification of family-run businesses. Parents learn from grandparents and now teaching their children. So the unlearning is the biggest challenge right now for the industry people. The change that is required to make it happen for the next 50 years or next revolution in the manufacturing is going to be driven by the young people. They have two choices. They can follow their parents' footsteps, or they can ask their parents to open the eyes and follow the leads from the younger people. I'm very happy to present Muhammad Erkan from Pakistan. His family has an amazing setup with about 100 acres of infrastructure from yarn all the way to the finishing, but they are home furnishings. And the young man comes in after getting education in UK and decides he is going to make a change. Muhammad Erkan, take it from here.
Hi. So yeah, I'd start from when I returned back from the UK in 2016 and joined textile industry. And all you see here is an industry that has been stuck in the years and years, actually decades behind time, while the fashion industry and the home furnishing industries is evolving so quickly. We had the manufacturing aspect of it is not willing to budge from where they were standing in the early 90s. When I joined, I worked in the home textile sector for 1 year, changed a little, diverted a little into technical textiles and see how performance textiles work into home textiles. And then finally decided on stepping into garments, particularly denim, because I saw that it was a very interesting area in which Pakistan could do much more and grab a bigger share of the total industry than it's currently contributing. So when I started establishing this new denim manufacturing, apparel manufacturing plant from ground up, I was surprised, Ram. I met these people who have been working in the industry for years, and the first thing they told me, "Oh, do not invest in automation. What are you doing? You don't need that until and unless you're making millions of pieces per day." So, with this small apparel manufacturing setup, I decided that I want to make this breeding ground for innovation within this industry. I wanted it to be agile so it could meet the needs of the fast-paced industry that we were supplying to. I mean, in the past couple of years, we have seen a huge trend of democratization of fashion. The retailers are suffering, there are new brands popping up every other day online, interesting product, interesting business model focused on sustainability, focused on transparency of supply chain. But the age-old industry in this part of the world wasn't ready and frankly wasn't willing to serve this new age of fashion that was coming in the West. And now we also see it coming in the East. I decided that I wanted to bring that same democratization of Industry 4.0, agility and sustainability within a smaller setup so we could serve all of these very interesting young brands around the world. And that's what we have been doing. I was lucky that my father, who has been in this business since the early 80s, was willing to take a chance. But that is one of the biggest problems in this part of the world that the generation above us is not willing to unlearn, as you said. And it's a very, very painful process. So I think this new generation of garment manufacturers in Asia really needs to take hold of the situation, and within their own capacity, they have to try and establish business models as interesting as the business models on the other end of the spectrum, on the consumer side, on the fashion side, the business models on the supply side have to be equally interesting, equally agile, and they have to market them in a similar fashion. I was just looking a couple of days ago that there is hardly any B Corp certified garment manufacturer in Asia, while there are hundreds of B Corp certified fashion companies popping up in USA and the UK. So we really need to step up, see what is the requirement of the brands of the future, and really try and create business models that serve that.
Wonderful. David, I think we need to bring you in and share your views with all the changes, and not that you haven't seen the changes, but where do you see this change going, and what do we need to do as industry people at every facet of their responsibilities, whether it is a brand or a retailer, whether it is a manufacturer or importer, whether it is a vendor or the sourcing companies. As sourcing companies who were the go-between getting, or the facilitators, but somehow or the other, a lot of people think, well, why am I paying them commission? So let's cut them out. But can you imagine the kind of market intelligence that that breed of people have? What do customers want in the importing countries, and what are the capabilities within those countries? Can you just expand on that a little?
I like the idea that you talk about a revolution. This is going to be a really bloody revolution, and there are going to be a lot of people dying. The fact is, most people at the retail level and the brand level not only have no awareness of what the customer wants, the consumer, they don't even care. I'll give you a short history. 120 years ago, somebody set up a package where consumers could buy products from a picture. It was called the Sears and Roebuck catalog. It worked because in the smaller towns, there were no stores. And so there was a ready market automatically. This continued for a long time, but eventually the Sears people shut down the catalog and became the largest department store in the United States. And this was because the brick and mortar store could offer something that no catalog could offer. A customer could go into the store and see the garment. They could feel the garment. They could put the garment on. In some cases, even today, you could actually have alterations on the garment. You can't have alterations on the internet. You can't try the garment on the internet. But today, people are going back to the picture. The picture is better than the brick and mortar store. Why? We have to ask ourselves, we say, well, it's because the internet is killing the store. And yet, when you think about it, every store has a website. And even with that website, they are failing. At the same time, the pure play people, the real e-commerce people, many of them are opening brick and mortar stores and doing quite well. It isn't the location, it isn't the venue. The answer is quite simple, that the winners are providing the consumer, they're selling the consumer what the consumer wants to buy. There's no other answer. The brick and mortar stores that are failing, and they're at all sizes, they're failing because simply they're not providing what the consumer wants. So we go back to the original thing. You ask, how do we find out what the consumer wants? And the first answer is, why don't you find out? Why don't you stop telling the consumer what they want while you're failing? This is the beginning. And this is an unlearning experience. And by the way, it is not the role of the factory to follow the buyer. The factory has to go ahead and reach out to the consumer. I have to have a factory where the consumer will want to work with me. When we talk about things like compliance, and we talk about sustainability, we talk about pollution, we're not talking about the retailer. We're not talking about the brand. In New York City, Los Angeles, you don't employ 10-year-old children. I hope not. But when they're talking about ethics, they're talking about the factory. And the factory has to build those ethics. Forget about what the customer says. You need that, because if the customer is not ethical, they're going to get wiped out. The contemporary consumers, particularly the young people, they want what everybody wants. Certainly, they want good fit, they want good make, they want good design, they want low price. But they have another set of requirements. They don't want their goods being made by 10-year-old kids, and they don't want their goods being made by women working 70-hour weeks with not a day off in the month. They want to have a responsible factory, a factory that's clean and neat, which is safe. And eventually, when I say eventually, in the next 1 or 2 years, those influencers, those people on the internet who have tens of millions of customers who are talking about design and they're talking about labels, they're going to start with another dimension. They're going to be talking about compliance. They're going to be talking about sustainability. The factory that is there, the brand that is there, the customer that is brand can stand tall. The problems we face today in our industry are not the result of the pandemic. These problems we can trace back 10, 20 years. The pandemic has simply brought it to a head. And it's our responsibility, thinking people in the industry, to assist the industry to move forward. Thank you, Ram.
Wonderful. I agree that we have opportunities. Question now is, are those opportunities going to be availed by the startup companies or some of the companies who already have the experience, who are willing to pivot? We cannot have the factories of today cater to the consumer of tomorrow or post-COVID. There are a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard of, fitting rooms are not open, even when the stores are open. People don't want to try on clothing, even when they buy from the store, stores do not allow it. I get a lot of requests from, can I measure the customer without touching the customer, and on and on and on. But if you look at how the factories, with big factories, created bigger problems and a bigger support staff. Even when we had the factories in the United States and Canada, the factories not only kept the workers, but it required infrastructure behind it, the offices to run those. As the factories left, so did all these offices. Now that all the people are working, or majority of the people are working from homes, so many sectors are now getting disruption. Whether it is a real estate or commercial real estate, whether it's a transportation, whatever area that you look at, there is a disruption going on. I have been saying for the last 50 years that I've been working, change is constant. growth is optional. Most of us have CEOs and CFOs and CTOs. And my request has been for the last 15 years that every customer, every client, every person I've met in the business world, I've been pleading that please hire a new C-level executive called CPO, Chief Paranoia Officer. One who constantly looks for changing something because you're getting too comfortable. This is not a comfort business. Look at what happened to Kodak. Fuji didn't. They managed to survive. Look at so many of them who really kept exploiting what they had without making any exploration of the new business models. Today, the factories are going to be where the consumer is. That is a given. The supply chains are going to be smaller, shorter. Supply chains are going to be in the proximity. That's what we used to do, and that's what we are going to do. But that doesn't mean that it's going to take away the businesses from countries like the factories of the world, China or India or Bangladesh, because there's a billion people in China. There's another billion people in India. They are going to need clothing and they are going to need products which can cross-country go from one to the other. Yes, the fast fashion, the so-called fast fashion, the one that we needed now may be produced nearby. But the one which is staple items and I can afford to wait because the risk factor is lower, I can do it overseas. But not everybody is going to do that. Emma, what do you hear in UK? You've been involved in this one.
Yes, I think it's an interesting, obviously these are all very interesting concepts. And I think before we start discussing the intricate changes that have to take in the supply chain, we have to approach the reality that we're not talking about incremental change and we're not talking about an evolution. When Ram says a revolution, what he is saying is that we're looking at a total paradigm shift away from the fashion design as being dictated by the customer and the industry dictating what consumers will buy, to consumers dictating the terms of purchase, to consumers dictating the terms of what should be designed and what should be retailed, to consumers dictating the terms of how should factories function, how should supply chains function, how should products be distributed. And I think that this is a really, really crucial and fundamental concept to understand just how foundational the shift is going to be. And I think that the UK is a really interesting example of examining the impact of the consumer and also the influencer demographic that is kind of not taken seriously because, let's face it, they spend a lot of time trying on clothes online and hauling, and it's not super sustainable. But the reality is they're the only people who have direct contact with the consumer on a day-to-day basis, that have a level of communication and transparency that nobody in the industry has. Customers certainly do not have a in the bedroom type of conversation that influencers have with their consumers. And so when David says that these people have the ability to change the industry from one day to another, they really do, because they're talking directly to the consumer demographic. And if the entire supply chain isn't engaged to serving this consumer body, which is now a fundamental player in the industry in and of itself, then things will never work properly. And I'm not just talking about the factory, but also how is cotton farmed? If we're talking about cotton that consumes massive quantities of water and they're not using the drip method for irrigation, cotton doesn't feed the individuals who are doing the farming itself, and therefore it's not sustainable in that regard. So we're really looking at these meticulous, very nuanced levels that once the consumer and once the influencer begins to recognize just how endemic problems are and just how many problems exist in the intricacies of the industry, there is going to be absolute forced and radical change. Now, I definitely think there's a lot that can be done to sort of mitigate risk and to move faster. I think that Erkan is really moving in the right direction in terms of the way that he's talking about the industry, in terms of his perspective on the future of Pakistan, especially when you're talking about denim, which has been a problematic product in the past, but now there's so much technology and innovation that's really sort of driving sustainability, waterless denim, changing the types of toxicity and the washes, and that this is kind of, it really sort of encapsulates the potential future direction of the industry. But when you look at how industry operates on a national scale, so in the UK, for example, the UK is interesting because it is one of the larger exporters of garments. I think David would know better than me, but I think it ranks as the 11th largest global exporter of garments. And yet it's an industry that is totally unknown and totally ignored by the government. And the UK is known for the fast fashion, or what I would call to be disposable fashion goods. So it's not the same as in Inditex, for example. And it's also known for Burberry trench coats and Barbour jackets. So you have both sides of the equation of incredibly expensive and incredibly cheap. There is no regulation. There is no real interest in implementing change. There is a lot of disregard that's placed on the technology and the innovation that has occurred, especially in Asian countries, where you really see remarkable factories, remarkable suppliers pushing things forward, who are really engaged in change. That is largely disregarded in the UK because what we come down to is a massive cultural issue. That the problems that exist in the industry themselves, they are fixable on a technical level. But what we need to look at are the cultural issues. If we're going to implement something like speed to market and fast turn manufacturing, that requires getting rid of middle management. And middle management tends to be the people who actually end up firing everybody in the first place and firing and hiring them. And so we're looking at a massive cultural shift, not just to meet the consumer needs, but to operate on a very, very basic level.
Very well said. If you look at what's happening in the US in the retail, a lot of these retailers relied on the middle management who literally protected their own jobs. They did not add any value. They slowed the process down. They increased the cost of acquisition of goods. And eventually the delays that caused the markdowns and the losses. Some of these retailers may survive, may. If they don't change, they will not. And this change has to come right from the top. Somebody has to understand and look at what value is being added by which person, and if that person is necessary to be had. What Erkan did, and I have utmost respect for his thought process, he comes from a country where denim is predominantly the leader. Everybody and their brothers are making $5, $6, $7, $8 denim jeans. They have all the resources, the know-how, but did not have the know-how from the design and development and distribution. So he flies into United States, hired the people, and rather than making a $6 or $8 garment, making a $25 or $30 garment. I don't need to make that many garments to generate revenue. What is wrong with having all the infrastructures and having to add a little deviation in the business model to go direct to consumer? That is coming. If somebody doesn't understand that, look at the most successful automotive company, Tesla. No distributor, no showrooms. They have nothing of the sort of the infrastructure. And you want to see a state-of-the-art factory here in California, a 500,000 meters factory where from aluminum to automobiles, all done automatically. Yet they employ a lot more people in a different classification. I'm not saying the sewing machine operators will not be required. They just add 2 pieces under the needle, but somebody else has to decide what goes under the needle, how many of them go in. This thought process of making so many of a kind so that I can get the little bit of economy in my labor savings, that needs to be changed. We are going to have small factories. We are going to have agile factories. We're going to have a cut and sew. Micro factory doesn't mean small. Micro factory means you think in a micro management of products. So you make multiple products. A side seam of a shirt or a pant or a skirt or a dress is a side seam. The side seam operator doesn't know the difference. It just becomes a product towards the end. I need to engineer myself, engineer my product, but start from design and development. Go small, but go straight to the consumer. Even countries like India, where there are a lot of people now going in the e-commerce, they're doing phenomenal job. It's not that we have to export everything. What about taking care of what we call the low-hanging fruit? David, your thoughts on that?
Let me sum this up very simply. The difficulty we have with the customer today is we never get to reach the person who cares about the money. We're dealing with a buyer who wants equitably priced. We're dealing with these people all along the way. To be successful, you have to go to the person at the top who doesn't care about fashion, doesn't care about delivery, doesn't care about FOB, doesn't care about anything except how much money can I make from your factory? Show me in 6 months the percentage profit on your product compared to the percentage product from your competitors. Then I'll leave you alone and you make whatever you want. Don't talk to me, just give me what I want. But you can't get there. That's the problem. There are all these people in the way. And so the alternative is to turn away from the customer altogether. And as you say, go directly to the consumer, go to e-commerce, go on internet to these master websites that have many, many designs. It's an alternative because the industry at the retail level is not interested in making money. I don't know how else to say it. They're succeeding by failing. Yes, we're not interested in making money. We're interested in getting low FOB price. That's what we're looking for. The new industry will be different because the old industry will no longer exist.
I'm sure there are a lot of people here who have heard this anti-China sentiment. Americans have had issues with tariffs and on and on and on. It doesn't matter what we say, what we do. China is here to stay. China is not going away. China has been working very hard. Li and Feng. I mean, who else knows this industry extremely well, from the consumer to the manufacturer and everything in between, all over the world? For many, many years, as the brands were going under in the United States, Li and Feng kept buying those brands, the middle and the higher end. Li and Feng was brought in by China to be the consultants because China doesn't care about made in China. They said managed by China. And nothing wrong with that. Japan did that with Korea and other countries. Korea did that with other countries. And China is doing it. Hong Kong did it. We bring the business in, we control the fabrics, and you do the labor part. But the labor at those cheap countries keeps going up. Eventually, if you look at the cost of manufacturing in the United States, it's as much as it is in China. So it's not the cheap labor countries. Eventually, all those cheap labor countries are going to get up there because that's what should be done anyway for the labor. We should be making them get fair wages and give them respect for what they do. Sadly, we are at the vendor level dependent on the retailers. If vendors have not learned during this COVID and understood that their loyalty was not, there was no partnership, there was no business relationships, there was commercial relationship, and when the time got tough, they left you hanging dry. Now it's time for you to do something back to the retailers. And I'm not professing any sentiment here, but it bothers me to see millions of people left in the lurks because the retailer was more concerned about their own financial statements. How do we solve this problem for a lot of people who are hurting so bad?
Ram, let me just say something. Where is the center of the global garment industry?
Say that again.
Where is the center of the global garment industry?
It's a hard question.
I don't think so. I think the center of the global garment industry, despite everything, is in Hong Kong. A place that has more Starbucks than sewing machines. The sewing machines are not the factor. It's where the industry is located, it's where the talent is located, it's where the education is located. You can have an industry with machines. You go to Italy. You know, there are beautiful goods being made in Italy. The average person in Italy is being paid, I don't know, 15 euro an hour. You know, but there's a market for it because they have built something. You build something and you can keep it. The idea that, oh, you have a cheap garment industry and then later on it moves out and away, that's nonsense. You can keep the industry even if you move the machines out. It is you have to have a holistic way of looking at the industry. You are not a factory.
I agree with you.
You are not a middleman. You are not a retailer. All of those things are disappearing. You know, the entire supply chain, as we understand it, frankly, never worked. You know, I did a supply chain 20 years ago in a book that had 101 steps and it was 3 feet long. Today, that supply chain would have 4,000 steps, be 120 feet long, and be worthless because the supply chain itself is not really physical. There's a different, it's multi-dimensional, it doesn't go linearly, it's a different way, and we have to adapt ourselves. We have to get rid of the old definition. We have to start again with a clean slate. And the reason why many of these startups are doing well, because they don't know anything. They don't know the mistakes of the garment industry. And so they're going ahead and doing their stuff. And by the way, 80% of them are going broke every year, but the fact remains that there are tens of thousands of them. And it is the fastest moving, most profitable part of the industry, not because of internet, because they're not bogged down.
Wonderful.
I mean, Rob, do you want to hear something unbelievably stupid? You and I are at the cutting edge of the industry. That people of our age should be at the cutting edge of anything?
Well, you're a rare breed, I must say. Not motivated by the dollar signs, but a passion that you have for this industry. And that passion is something that money can't buy. It's you know, if you really look at it, the industry really needs a change. And that change will come always from the factories. It doesn't come from design rooms sitting in New York or London or someplace. A lot of people don't understand China with the number one. No, European Union. If you look at the exports out of European Union are as many as what China is. There's a huge, big manufacturing industry in the United States, not to take care of all our needs, but enough. But one thing is for sure, that going forward, too many things are going to be different. 40 million people unemployed. They're not looking at buying clothes, they're looking for food. Who is most unemployed? Women. Men still have the jobs. The frontline jobs in the grocery stores and in the retail stores and so on, but women, they are out of work and they don't have the money to buy. So question now is, what are we going to do for the next 4 quarters? It's going to take 5 years before somebody starts seeing the light. But somebody needs to look at, I need to do short steps within the country or within the industry, and what is my differentiator? If you're still looking for what happened pre-COVID, and if those days were going to come back, you're dreaming. Because that dream is not a dream. It's a bloody nightmare. Let's just look at this one. I'm going to open up the last 15 minutes of this one to a question answers. Savannah Crawford, one of our associates, has been gathering all the questions, and I'm going to ask her to now take over, pass it on to the panel, and then the panel can decide who wants to answer the questions coming in from the audience.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've got a lot of questions coming in the chat, so we'll try to get through as many of them as possible. One thing is that we've mentioned a lot about the supply chain or the brand of the future. So my question to all the panelists is, what might that supply chain look like? Have you seen any exciting business models that you think might represent this supply chain of the future and where the industry is headed or should go? And then to answer the broader question as a follow-up is, how would these business models help better understand what the customer wants, whether that's the end consumer or the different customers that exist throughout the supply chain? So I'll open that up to all panelists.
David, do you want to take this first?
I want to go back to your microfactory. We think of a supply chain as wool from Australia, greasy wool from Australia going to Italy where it's spun, going to China where it's knitted into sweaters, and then shipped to the United States. I don't know what we're talking about, 40,000 miles. You're talking about a microfactory where basically you have a supply chain in one room. As long as you have the fabric, you have the design, you have the manufacturing, it's all in one room. That, to talk about the supply chain as some linear event makes no sense. You're making life more complicated. There are many opportunities you have there which breaks the entire supply chain. And the new industry has to deal with this.
The automation will play a major role.
You know something, I have discussions about this, and let me just say this. If you're in the shirt business, if you're in the blazer jacket business, automation is great. If you're in the blouse business or the dress business, no. I'm still debating whether the microfactory should have heavy capital equipment in the sewing department, or I should have multitask workers in the sewing department. There are advantages based on the product, based on the price range, and based on the quantities.
I want to answer this a little differently. We don't have to look at the holistic approach of technology. We've got to break it down. Where do we have the biggest payback with the least possible investment? And to your point, we've got to have cross-trained operators. We've got to start thinking like a glorified sample room where I make whatever the customer wanted, except this time the customer is the consumer. So I have to create myself a cut and sew and design are 3 different departments. Put my technology in the design development, and cutting. So you have the material savings and time savings. But as far as the sewing is concerned, that has to be done on the floor. Whether you put the jigs and robots, but that is not for another 10 to 15 years. Till now, we've got to have those fingers and the needles and so on to be able to finish the product. But don't start something with categories which is not your specialty. I have so many microfactories running right now on our business model. There are about 10 of them running in Pakistan alone. But they have already decided these are the materials that we are going to work with. These are the trims, and the designers are given those parameters, no different than what Zara has been doing. As Zara designers don't have the access to materials, the merchants have that. The designers are given silhouettes that you design, collection that you design within these parameters, and you get onto the next design, next collection. That thing has to be done in an engineered way, but considering that as little touch as possible between the departments. We cannot continue to think the way we have been working.
Let me give you one idea. We're going into a craft industry. The definition of craft is changing. The use of tools, the use of computers, computer modeling, that requires craft. It's not an engineering thing in itself. It is a talent thing. We're just renaming new crafts, and your microfactory is a craft. And where the machine works better than the person, you put in the machine. Where the product requires a person, you have to train the person. Your role in providing the software, 50% has to be training. The software is useless unless you have talented people, qualified people, craft people to use it.
Sadly, the technology people are looking at monetizing every little area. Many of them are motivated by the revenue streams. Hence, it is a business model. I'm not going to go into what we do. This is not the forum. And on Tukatalks, we don't promote products or people or services. We discuss the problems of the industry and give honest solutions or opinions. So on that line, let me ask Emma, what would you like to add in there?
I mean, I think what you were saying about technology as being the people who are in the tech industry want to solve all problems with new technology. And I think we wind up with fundamental problems when we take that route. I'm doing a PhD at UCL, and one of my supervisors helps spin out, projects for Google and stuff like that. And everything is about, let's automate this. And I think one of the issues that we have with the fashion industry, unlike other industries like technology or the beauty industry or the automotive industry, is that those industries create standardized products. Maybe they launch 100 products a year, and all of those products, in order to be verified and to appear on a shelf or to appear on an app store, have to be exactly the same. You essentially cut and paste. And I think the problem with one of the issues with technology, especially when we discuss the fashion industry with people who are tech advocates, not that I'm a Luddite, but who are really pushing a tech agenda, is that there is a disconnect around the type of products that we are making. You look at a pair of jeans that are hanging in a store, and somebody has professionally taken a perfectly good pair of jeans and then taken a Dremel and cut holes in that pair of jeans based on the aesthetic inspiration of the designer. And this, I think, the nuances of the products that we're creating, especially when you look at the higher end products, where if you go and try on a Dolce & Gabbana jacket, very frequently those jackets, although they're the same aesthetics, they're the same design, they have different shapes because somebody with a mind was sitting there thinking about making that jacket, correcting the mistakes of the jacket, crafting a 3D object for a 3D person. And these nuances are what makes fashion products, and what frequently makes them different from every other product out there. And so while I'm definitely a proponent for technology, I do think that there's a lack of awareness in terms of what are we doing here? What are the problems that we are trying to solve? And does technology actually solve this problem, or does education and human experience and multi-skilled individuals solve the problem better?
Well, you've really opened up a Pandora's box here. Technology doesn't mean I have a light switch that I just switch it on and it's illuminated everywhere. As David said, it requires training and implementation and the correct use of that technology. We are at a very desperate times. Sometimes we look at it, and I look at all the requests coming in. People are grasping for anything right now. They'll grapple anything that they can think this may be a solution. But this business is very simple, really is. The mantra here is the only thing that sells is fit. Let's start from there. Understand who your consumer is and develop that fit. Everybody is now working towards, and not everybody, there are hundreds of companies working on the digital fitting room, because we understand by having a garment look on my body or having a magic mirror doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. The real test is when the garment arrives and it fits my body, I keep it. If it doesn't, I send it back. I take it to the fitting room. If it doesn't fit me, I put it back on the rack. So fit is the only reason, and nobody is working on creating the fit, the virtual fit. That is the last mile in the technology, where development all the way to manufacturing on demand for that consumer that fits first time. That would be the end. Till then, we have to look at what else can we do? Why do I have to have pattern makers sitting here, sample makers sitting here, fabric people, some print designers? Because that's the way we have been working. Digital space allows me to do a lot of things. I'm not suggesting my technology. I'm saying use a bloody technology, but use it to make sure that it is not a band-aid. It has a backward integration and forward integration. If you have to go and redo manually to validate what I'm seeing is correct, then that's not a technology. If you added something with technology, then go ahead. Faucet. I don't know if any of you remember those typewriter companies, calculator companies, the manual calculating machines. Anybody, you remember that, David?
Yeah.
And they were so happy. They were the best thing that money could buy in the factory business. And they got so engrossed into their business that they didn't even realize the Japanese made a handheld calculator. The worst part is they were using the Japanese calculators to validate if their manual calculators were working right. This is the state of this industry today.
We did a study recently. The cost of sample making in a New York operation for one style is $4,000. When you include it all together, you can do it in a factory for about $295. Getting away from that is remarkable. The problem is, and this is something that Emma will talk about. You go into a shop that sells vintage clothes. Emma?
Yeah, so I think that one of the arguments that David and I get into on a regular basis is looking at the difference between sort of what technology can do in terms of pattern making and what humans are doing, what humans have done for the entire history of the fashion industry, which is to become pattern makers and to practice the art of pattern making. And one of the points that I tend to raise when we discuss the value of not just automizing pattern making, but having infinite sizes. So what I hear a lot in the UK when I speak to the customers is, if only we could have 1,000 sizes, that would solve all of our problems. Neglecting what Ram has said, which is that it all comes down to fit. Because if you are a woman or a man, but I'm a woman, so I don't know what men go through, and you want to buy clothes on the internet, it is far less risky business to buy vintage clothes that sort of made before the 1980s, where the pattern maker was paid a reasonable fee. And the continuity between what the designer wanted to create, what the pattern maker developed, and what was produced in the factory was real integrity. And so as long as I have the waist size, I can buy clothes that fit if they were made before the 1980s. And I think that the same is not true with new designers, with new customers, where I can't just order from an online retailer a whole bunch of different clothes and know that they'll fit. I'll have to order, 6 different items in 2 different sizes. I'll receive 12 and probably send them all back, because that understanding of the integrity of the 3-dimensional form that an individual person can comprehend and then sort of create a pattern for and communicate with the designer and communicate with the factory to make sure that integrity exists. That, as far as I'm aware, and maybe Ram can educate me, but the AI is simply not there yet. The AI to generate that type of human understanding is not there.
You're 100% correct. But I'm going to now ask David to validate my point. In the old days, in our days, before I go there, David, I want to share something with you when you started with the Sears catalog. About 48 years ago, when I was living in Toronto, there was a huge, big industry catering only to Eaton's catalog business. Mm-hmm. And one fine day, Eaton's decided to shut it down. That was 1975. 10,000 people in Toronto became unemployed. Nothing different than what is going on right now. And it affected a small little industry. Going back to your design patterns, Emma, in our days, it was vertical. The pattern maker was with designer. All best designers had either the ability to make the patterns or work with the pattern makers. They had the vertical sample room. They did the testing. Today, these guys are sitting in the United States. They are so-called designers. They have no idea what a pattern looks like. They don't even know how to balance a garment. And these people who are going to do the patterns are sitting in Asia. They have no idea what the designer was envisioning. So the communication broke down.
Yeah.
You know what? It's a huge problem. And I challenge all the factories to now take one extra step and say, excuse me, Mr. Designer, Miss Designer, I know what you wanted. I will add my design value because I've been making patterns for years and I know what a fit should be and I know what the garment should look like and I know I have the fabrics here and I will create this product and I will ship it to your boss, your retailer. And that would be the concluding remark of mine.
That is 150 years old. 150 years old, design was a stylista who had the original concept and a modelista who took that concept and made it into a workable garment. And said, no, the fabric you want there is not going to drape the way you want. It has to be done. There'll be a fight. And in the end, the designer would get what they actually want. You need a factory, a full service factory with a modelista, a European who can talk to the designer. She receives a sketch. I don't understand this sketch. By the way, designers fudge the first sketch because they're not going to do anything until they see a first sample anyway. I don't understand. What is the sleeve you're talking about? Is this a drop? Tell me what you want. I'll do it for you. And oh no, this way of making is not the way you want to make it. In a factory, we have a blind stitch machine from Italy, by the way, it's $7,000, and we will make a hem beautiful. Allow me to do my job, and I will give you what you would love to have but never get. You do that, and they'll be waiting in line. That's the factory of the future.
You know the saying, if Muhammad won't go to mountain, the mountain will come to Muhammad.
Yeah.
Well, Muhammad Erkan decided to do the same. He came to Los Angeles, the home of premium denim, hired the best designer. That was the smartest thing. Have that person come in and put a line together around denim, but not the conventional products that everybody's looking at. So sometimes you gotta think out of the box. Sometimes you gotta go to the mountain, or sometimes you gotta bring the mountain to Muhammad.
I'll give you an important area to change. There was a time when the London College of Fashion had a degree course, a 3-year degree course in pattern making. Why doesn't FIDM have that? You're supporting an industry. You kindly support the industry with the skill sets they need.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, there are 19 universities in California who teach pattern making only on computer. There are 3 high schools now in California, Los Angeles School District, who teach pattern making from grade 10 to 13, because we understand that without pattern making knowledge, you have no place in the apparel business. It doesn't matter, you're not going to be a pattern maker. David, I'm a mechanical engineer. I didn't have to become a welder or machinist, but I had to learn those trades so that I can design the equipment and know, A, what trades are required to complete that job, how long should it take, what the quality should be. And if I don't know the trade, sketching is not design. On that note, Erkan, did you want to add anything? Because we are running 4 minutes over.
Just a little bit. I think that the problem that we are not seeing is that pattern making it's been done by factories for years now. And essentially, by doing all of that, they're subsidizing the retailer just to improve their top line revenues. And until and unless the retailer and the factory both realize that we are offering this very, very valuable service in form of making a sample for $250, which would have cost $4,500 in New York, and in form of making this pattern, for which we hold the experience and the equipment, and we are providing all of these services to the customer, they both need to realize and then start paying up for it. Because when the factory is doing it for free, the factory is not spending enough on it. And when the customer is asking for free, customer is not realizing the value to it. So I got this collection made from a top line denim designers, but then I'm going to the customer and saying that, don't look at me as a factory, look at me as a design consultancy, look at me as a pattern making services, and then decide what you're going to pay me for that garment. And that is the biggest challenge that the factories of the future have to face. But now these things are going to...
I've been hearing this story for 25 years. For 25 years, factories have been telling me they want the service, but they're not going to pay for it. And I'm giving you the same answer I gave them. You have to talk to somebody who cares about money, not the buyer, not the merchandiser. You have to talk to somebody high enough in the company and say, look, I'm making this for you. Just check it out for 6 months and see how much money you make from it. Don't bother asking me about the pattern maker. You make more money from me.
But I think that things change slightly now, which is that if you are a designer, then go to the consumer. You're designing for the consumer, whether you're a factory or whether you're a customer. And I think that factories that are this innovative as yours is, Erkan, where you have such so many sort of diverse revenue streams, where you offer so many different services, you're essentially a customer for the consumer. The consumer just doesn't know it yet. And I think that this is really the future if we're talking about microfactories that offer in-house design, in-house product development, in-house testing and sustainability measurements. And, they have scientists and engineers and designers and creatives. That is incredibly marketable. That is something that consumers would love to talk about and be involved in. Influencers would love to visit and promote because it's tangible and it's exciting and it's honest, it's authentic in a way that customers could never be because they are not.
Absolutely. We have to design and develop what we are best at and then take our stuff, okay? Italians don't try to sell American food. They are good at their food. Let's continue this conversation on another post. I want to thank David. Your time, so valuable. Your input, Mohammed, is just fantastic. And Emma, I can't thank you enough for giving all the feedback even before this seminar. I would love to have you guys back one by one and discuss really in details so many of these questions which we have, but we're sadly running out of time. So thank you so much and have a wonderful evening and wonderful day. It is 7:07 a.m. in Los Angeles. Goodbye from California.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tukatalks. Visit tukatech.com/Tukatalks to join the conversation. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.